begin, if you could begin by introducing yourself. So just giving your name and telling us, what you do, and tell us a little bit about Boundless.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Xiao Wang. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Boundless Immigration. We are a technology company that helps families navigate the family-based immigration processes to the US. So that includes green cards and naturalization so that they can become US citizens. At the core, I think everyone who has either gone through it themselves or knows someone who's been through the immigration process has remarked about how complex it is, how difficult it is, how stressful it is, because it's so high stakes and it can determine the future of yourself and your family members, to a point where my family, when I came over here from China, we spent almost five months of rent money on immigration attorneys just because we didn't know any better, and this was our one shot. And this is a story that's echoed by millions of families every year. So when this is something exactly that like data and technology can do so well, which is what we're able to do is help tens of thousands of families every year be able to understand what they need to do, answer the questions the right way, get something reviewed by an immigration attorney, all for hundreds of dollars instead of thousands of dollars. And because of the volume and the amount of families that we can help, we actually have some really interesting data and insights around like, hey, what is happening with the immigration system that can further make people have better experiences.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll ask you to maybe try to speak a little bit more slowly, just because they are a non-native English speakers that will be trying to listen to your interview. So I'd really appreciate it if you could try. I know it's difficult to slow down, but
Sounds good.
Okay, great, thank you. So for someone who doesn't know, like, what is a green card?
So a green card is a nickname. The official term is called legal permanent residence. And that means that you are able to legally reside in the US and work and travel outside of the US and back in perpetuity. Basically, is you can always retain that ability if you live in the US at least 6 months out of the year. And if you continue to file and renew your green card. And it is the first stage in I will call it the immigration process, where you have permanence and where you have stability. Many people come to the US before with temporary immigration statuses. So you may hear them as like H-1Bs for employers or F-1s for students, etc. But those all have specific rules that are tied either to a specific employer or a school or amount of time. But once you apply for and receive your green card or legal permanent residence, you now no longer have to worry about your status running out, and it means that you can stay in this country for as long as you like to.
Okay, great. And so how long does it take roughly to get a green card, and how much does it cost?
This question depends so widely. Luckily, for folks from Italy, they are not subject to the long wait times that folks from other countries are. So the US government limits the number of people who can receive their green card every year by country. And so if you are from the Philippines or India or China, sometimes the wait time can be 10 or 20 years. But for Italians, it's actually much shorter. It genuinely depends on if you're currently in the United States or if you're currently abroad or outside of the United States. But we generally see time periods of about 1 to 2 years all in for the green card application process.
Can just anybody apply for the green card? Because honestly, that is the impression that most people have, and certainly Americans seem to have. I know from my own story, I'm an Irish citizen. I've lived in the US since 2005. I have a renewable visa because I'm a media representative, so I can just renew it every 5 years, and it's all very easy. but I would love to have a permanent residency. I would love to have a green card. And people say to me, well, just apply for one. But I'm like, well, how? Unless I want to marry an American, which I don't, or, you know, work for an American company. And even that's really tricky now. You sort of have to be a specialist in a given area. I mean, there's not an easy path. And there is just this assumption that there is like, oh, once you've lived here long enough and, you know, you're legal and everything, you can just take that first step, which is the case in other countries. Like the girl I grew up next to in Ireland, she moved to Canada 5 years ago. She's already got dual citizenship. You know, she just followed that straight path. And of course, you know, we don't have that option in the US. And so if you can explain that in your words,
Yeah.
you know, who can and can't, or the steps you have to go through to get a green card and the conditions in which it can be granted.
You make a very good point, in which that a person cannot just get in line for her green card. There are two main paths by which to obtain the green card. And the first is through family-based immigration, and second is through employment-based immigration. On the family side, you will either have to be married to a U.S. citizen or current green card holder. You would have to, or be a child of an American citizen or green card holder, or be a parent or sibling of an American citizen or green card holder. And so it needs to be a current permanent resident or citizen that is a close relative to you, who then applies on your behalf and allows you to become a green card holder. The second route is, as you mentioned, through the employer. So there are specific categories that employers are allowed to sponsor green cards for their employees. But they typically either, you have to demonstrate that you have an ability or skill or background that no one else has in the country, or put you at like world class, or you have to have advanced degrees in specific fields, and those lines get very long. So the idea is that like the less specialization that you have, the less world-renowned you are, the categories get larger and the number of people get smaller every year. And so it can take, 5, 10, 15 years or longer to receive employment-based green cards. And that's only if you work for a company that's willing to spend the $10,000 to $20,000 in immigration lawyer fees to pay for them.
Wow. Why do you think, and funnily enough, the last time I renewed my visa and I was coming back to the US from Ireland, the immigration officer in Dublin, we have a special arrangement with the US. We go through immigration in Ireland. And he said to me, well, why don't you just apply for a green card? And he's an immigration officer. And I had to explain to him that it's not that easy. So why do you think it's not that easy? I mean, is there a policy to limit immigration? And if so, why?
So there's been many policies over time as the U.S. has changed around how it views immigration. And it basically, it swings between when the U.S. needs workers and the immigration becomes a lot looser, to then there are too many foreigners and then immigration goes tighter. It started in the 1800s, even when the first wave and the first immigration regulation actually happened when people decided there were too many Chinese people in the US. And it was literally called the Chinese Exclusionary Act to ban immigration from China. And then later it spread through all of Asia. There was a period of time when especially after World War I, where all of these refugees came over from Europe. After which they created basically the 5 or 3% rule, where now there are specific caps per country where you couldn't exceed a certain percentage, which has lasted through even today. The last major immigration reform happened in 1965, which created this family-based immigration process that we just discussed. The challenge is that any immigration policy that affects green cards, so legal permanent residence, or citizenship, naturalization, requires congressional approval. So when you hear of what's going on in this current administration under Trump and all the various immigration changes, those are all not green card or citizenship related. But for those, you need congressional approval. And over the last 50 years, Congress has not been able to agree on a new set of immigration policies that fit what global mobility looks like now in the 21st century. They were very close in 2000 and in 2013 during the Obama administration, but they couldn't get it done. And depending on what happens with the remaining Senate race in Georgia, if the Republicans keep the Senate and the Democrats have the House of Representatives, there will likely not be any immigration policy reform until the elections change.
So you're talking about an amnesty as well?
I'm talking about any policies that give people legal permanent residence or beyond. And so an amnesty program, like that has been talked about, for example, for DACA or for Dreamer, so people who came to the U.S. when they were younger and don't have valid status. Those folks, in order for them to have anything more than just the ability to stay in this country and work, which is what the DACA program is, for them to actually be able to be legal permanent residents or be able to become US citizens require congressional approval.
Got it. Okay, so we've all heard of the green card marriage, where someone marries an American so that they can get a green card, because that is one of the pathways in order to do so. Do you think that's really common? Do you think people do just marry and have this agreement that it's just so the non-citizen can get citizenship?
Yeah, I actually think marriage fraud, which is where you're marrying someone just to get that green card, is pretty low. The government takes a very hard and very clear approach at evaluating cases, and you have to provide a significant amount of evidence, and the sponsor, so the American citizen, is legally and financially responsible for the person that they're applying for. What is, I think, more common though is that that people end up, especially if they're like already in the US, you end up falling in love with people that you're around. And there are times where it has accelerated these decisions, where let's say that one party was going to have to leave the country or not, and so it's caused couples to have this conversation earlier than otherwise. But as a whole, like, as a company that has helped tens of thousands of people through this process, we see very few cases where the express purpose of the relationship itself is to obtain a green card or legal permanent residence.
Can you talk about your own family's experience? So you said you came over from China and you had to spend a lot of money to go through the process. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, and this is our family story is probably very similar to a lot of other immigrant family stories, where my parents came over here as students, the student visa. I was actually still in China at the time. And then once I was able to come over and my parents graduated and got work, we applied for our green cards. And to do so, it was actually my father asked around at his office, and one of his coworkers had a family member that used a specific lawyer successfully. And so we literally trusted our entire family's future and life savings to a stranger. And luckily for us, like the lawyer actually was good and was able to successfully get us the green cards. But this has been a case where immigrants have been taken advantage of by unscrupulous immigration consultants, or what people sometimes call notarios, for decades, where you actually are giving bad advice and spending thousands of dollars for this to help. And so that's always something that has been in the back of my mind of, yeah, how do we help, how can people have a better experience through this? And this is why, what we are trying to do at Boundless gives people that option. You can always do it yourself, just like you could always file your tax forms on your own without any help, but it's really hard and you never feel good about it. You can always use a lawyer if you have the financial means, or if your case is very complex, and there's great lawyers out there in the country. Or, there are times where you just want a little bit of help. And for the first time with technology and data, we can give people that middle ground.
So there are estimated over 11 million undocumented immigrants in the US. What kind of obstacles do they face? And, why would somebody want to have a green card or to have legal status? Like, what are the advantages of that?
As an undocumented individual in the US, you're always living on the edge of fear, and your options are very limited. So on the former, anytime you make a mistake, you get pulled over for speeding, you or like you encounter law enforcement for any reason, you have the chance of being deported. And that is a really uncomfortable place to be, because if you're always thinking about like, hey, tomorrow might be, or today might be my last day in this country, it becomes very hard for you to really start really putting down roots, being fully dedicated and focused on your work, raising a family. All of these considerations is because you're always like worried that about stability. I imagine, like, today could be the last you leave your house, you may not come home, and that's a terrifying thought. Right? And then on the other side is that you have very much more limited options from which companies you're able to work at. And so a lot of them get taken advantage of by their employers because they have nowhere else to report them to or go. You can also never travel. You can never not leave the country, because once you do, you can't come back home. So you imagine living your whole life without being able to visit your family, or especially if someone's elderly who's like ill or any other reason, you're very limited into what you're able to do. And so why there's a push for amnesty and like pathways for these folks is that they are here in the US and they are not contributing to the society to the level that they could or they want to because of these limitations. And so is there a way to give them that opportunity, provided that they have lived a honorable like life in the US without committing any crimes, and like being contributed members to their community and society, for them to then have the ability to go to school or to work in different industries and really set down roots without creating an incentive for more and more people to come into the US without documentation. So I think that is the ultimate sort of tension around like around why this problem hasn't been solved. Everyone wants a solution to this. No one wants 11 million people to live in limbo and fear and not pay their not work and not contribute to the country the way that they want to. But also no one wants to create an invitation for 11 more million people to try to come in.
Got it. And so finally, like, what is the process to get a green card, and why is it called a green card?
It's called a green card because back in the day, the current one isn't even in ones. Back in the day, it was green. Is that just that simple? Now it's not even green anymore. So the process is that you have to complete a set of forms. So let's just take the family-based example. So if you were to if you were a foreign national and you were to marry a US citizen, they would file a whole set of forms around demonstrating who you are, who they are, their financial status, if they can support you, as well as everywhere that you've lived and worked, excuse me, and then any additional applications, such as for you to be able to get a work permit and legal work, or for you to get a travel permit so you can leave the country and come back. And so it's an entire package that for us averages about 300 to 400 pages. Of all of the evidence of your relationship, all the evidence of your financial status. And it is a massive amount of work that you then send off to the US government, and then you wait. And this is actually becomes the worst part for our customers, is that you send it in and then you just don't know what's going to happen until one day you get an invitation to go to an interview. And it's at that point where you would go to a local center at a preordained time, and then the adjudicator or the government officer at the interview will then review all of your documents and files, ask you and your partner any questions before determining if you're approved or not approved for the green card. But yeah.
Is it possible to go through that process and then be turned down?
Yeah, there's many places where you can get turned down along the process, or you can get turned down early because you forgot a document or you made a mistake on your applications. And then you could get turned down at the end when the officer decides that they don't approve your application. And at that point, for many families, it costs right now $1,760 for a lot of families to go through the green card application. And as I mentioned, over a year of their life. And oftentimes you then have to start over again. And basically go through this entire cycle now with more burden to prove something different so that you have more success the second time.
Wow, amazing. Well, thank you so much. This was wonderful, and I really appreciate it. That's
thank you.
A lot of insight, and I'm sure our readers will appreciate it as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
feel free to reach out if you have any more questions.
Okay, I will do for sure. All right, thanks. Take care. Bye.